Where does the inner game of mindfulness and emotional IQ fit in with leadership development? How
Yeah,
can we use those skills to speak, sound, and look like a leader? I'm Linda Katz-Wilner, founder of Successfully Speaking. I'm a speech and communication coach and trainer who helps leaders and aspiring leaders communicate with confidence, clarity, and credibility. My guest is Brian Frohn. Brian's an accomplished executive coach. He brings over 20 years of corporate leadership experience. Brian specializes in cognitive behavioral coaching and mindfulness, and he excels in enhancing executive performance and team dynamics. He's known for his transformative approach that focuses on confidence, clarity, and emotional intelligence to drive leadership excellence. So we have a lot of the same focus, even though we're coming from different fields. Welcome, Brian. It's a pleasure to have you here.
thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Linda.
And Brian, I'd like to start with I know you said you were in the corporate leadership world, and now you have your own business as an executive coach. Tell us how you got to that point.
Yeah. Well, I've always been fortunate enough to receive coaching as a benefit as an executive. My company was probably a small to mid-sized company, under $1 billion company. But they were a bit progressive, I think, in terms of providing coaching to executives and leaders. And so I always took advantage of the coaching, and I always found it extremely helpful. And as you say, transformational along the way in my sort of leadership and career journey. And then when I left my last position as an executive, I, like many of us, kind of post COVID, we're thinking about what do we want to do next? What kind of most resonates with my authentic self, kind of what I really wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to work for myself and have the flexibility. And I started thinking about coaching. And in fact, one of my coaches suggested I might be a good coach because I was a good coachee and I enjoyed coaching. And so I looked into that and decided to do that and got some certifications and some training and here we are.
That's great. So you could be on both ends of the table, right? You've been the recipient, now you can share that experience with other people.
Yeah, and I enjoy that. I think that's what helps the clients that come to me and the clients that I'm fortunate enough to have trust in me as a coach. The fact that I was a 20-year executive who was also a coachee and who is now coaching those same executives, I think adds to the coaching and adds to the credibility for people that are my clients and prospects.
Sure. And I know you add mindfulness. And tell me how that affects the leadership effectiveness by including mindfulness.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of mindfulness practices and stoicism and yogic philosophy and all the things that I think kind of there's a common teaching across those things in many religions, and it's all about how you're dealing with your inner self. And that to me is the biggest challenge we have as people, we have as leaders, that along with dealing with others that are dealing with their inner selves.
Mhm.
So that whole inner, what I call the inner game, or not just me, but I refer to it as inner game, is I think the most important thing, the most impactful thing, transformational thing we can focus on as people and as leaders, because it's the only thing we really can control to the extent we have
Mhm.
control, and it's so impactful to what happens on the outside. I've heard it said, and I repeat it all the time: the quality of your inner game determines the quality of your future. And you can translate that to the quality of your relationships, or the quality of your next decision, or the quality of your leadership. So to me, that's why mindfulness is so important.
I love the inner game because it's also the quality of how you perform in sports.
Yeah.
A lot of that's the inner game.
Yep.
Brian, you mentioned stoicism or being stoic, and I know that's part that you use that term a lot. Can you explain what you mean by stoicism?
Yeah. I get that question a lot, and being stoic, I think, is very different than stoicism. And I think sometimes we equate being stoic with kind of emotionless and stern and sort of resilient, which is in some ways great. But really, when I talk about stoicism, I'm talking about the philosophy that came out of the ancient Greek Stoics. Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. Some of those things are being more popularized now, and people are reading these teachings, and I think they're very helpful. And as I mentioned, the teachings of Stoicism, I think, quite a bit overlap with the teachings of many religions and Buddhism and Christianity and yogic philosophy, and really for me, it's just very accessible to me. I think it just makes sense, and it's just all about, again, controlling what you can control, which is very little, pretty much yourself, what you do. And we can't control our thoughts and emotions, but we can figure out how we can best work with those things, and how we can think about those thoughts and emotions, and then therefore controlling how we behave and how we respond, which is I think the main driver of how our life goes, how our leadership goes.
Mhm. You mentioned leadership. So now let's talk about leadership or executives today. What do you see as their most common challenges?
Yeah, I when I talk to clients and prospects and others, I usually, or certainly lately, have been boiling it down to really just two things. It's really dealing with what's going on up here. We all have thoughts, overthinking, negative thoughts, whatever we're thinking and feeling, which we have to deal with. That would be challenge number one. And challenge number two is other people, and other people either not doing what we want them to do or doing something we don't want them to do. And that's kind of a broad view of the challenges we face as leaders, particularly because we're dealing with people. And if I would take that further into sort of more tangible outcomes of those three problems, I would summarize it's confidence and clarity of decisions, really being clear and confident in what you're doing, managing stress and anxiety. We all have stress and anxiety,
Mm,
and we carry that into what we're doing. And we know how that distracts us and probably affects the quality of our work and relationships and decisions, but also affects how we take it home and how we interact with our spouse or partners and children
mhm,
and family. And then relationships and team dynamics. I kind of put those together. How do you get a team of very diverse people, whether they're diverse in the ways that we're looking for diversity, or just diverse in thought, diverse in the kinds of things that their mind and emotions do differently from our thinking and my and emotions doing, and that diversity creating challenges to enhance team performance.
mhm.
So it's really calm and clarity, stress, anxiety, and team performance as a function of really dealing with what's going on inside ourselves and dealing with others and how they're interacting with the world.
So that's your unique approach then on looking at those 3 pillars, is that correct? Or is there something else involved in your unique approach?
Well, I think that's really the most common denominator. I don't know if it's unique to me, but the way that I think about it and kind of approach each client, if you will, or someone I'm trying to help, it almost always comes down to how they're dealing with their own internal thinking, or someone else doing or not doing something. And then from there, it goes on. So that could create stress, that could
Mhm,
affect their communication, that could affect the team dynamics, and it certainly affects relationships. I like to say that relationships are really the key to any leadership position. If you're
mhm.
figuring out how those relationships can improve, how you're handling those relationships, where your relationships need improvement, that's really the bulk of the work. I do coaching for Georgetown University, and there tend to be younger people. They're not kids, but they're younger than I am, and they're
Mhm.
embarking on new careers, or they're trying to change careers, and it almost always comes down to relationships in kind of how they're trying to elevate to the executive level, for instance, or manage at the executive level.
Mm. Do you have any transformative moments that you remember where this approach has made a big difference for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, is having these sometimes small or sometimes larger little insights or transformations, as you're saying, in with my clients, and that's the sort of probably the main goal is to take a situation, a challenge, a goal, and figure out how we can not only operate differently tactically, but also think about it differently, or have it come in and understand what's happening in a little different way, and that happens all the time. I just recently uh, there's a lot of executives that I work with that are in transition. Sometimes, the
Mhm.
CFOs, executives, and you particularly at a certain stage of career, it's difficult to get another executive job. There's only one CFO, for example, in a company, and typically, a highly sought after position. So it's always competitive. And when you're out seeking jobs, which some of my clients are, it's tough because you know why you're not getting to that next round, what's happening. So I have several clients that are in this case, and one particular client was really, I would say pretty frustrated or down about their prospects and why they weren't getting to the next round. And so he hired me to help him figure this out. His goal was to get that job.
Mhm.
And through some coaching and through some mock interviews and some other processes, he's transformed how his confidence. He's come through now, and he's feeling like himself. He's realizing that he doesn't have to sort of play a role or not be himself or try to impress somebody in a way that he thinks they want to be impressed. Instead, he's found a way to be confident in his own inner voice or his own authenticity, and he's seen how that's working. He's got through interviews and got to rounds, and he's been much more successful. So that's an example of kind of a mental shift in how he's thinking about things. I work a lot with mental models. How do we think about this? How could we think about it differently? Not sort of just positive thinking and flipping it around, but reality. Is that really kind of what makes sense, or is something different that makes sense? And oftentimes, clients can find a new reality that actually makes even more sense. It's actually much more productive. Or I work on techniques, breathing techniques, journaling, meditation. Um, any way, different clients need different things. I always like to say, I don't like to teach or give a program or tell someone this is what they need to do, because everybody's different.
Mhm.
Some people hear mindfulness, oh, okay, that's kind of weird foo-foo stuff. Some people want to dive in and talk about the universe and consciousness and whatever. So this particular client was pretty not really well versed in those things, and just was feeling stressed, and he's had a he would describe a transformation in terms of his confidence and his confidence in his own authenticity.
Mhm.
And that's very rewarding. That's why I do it. It's
Mhm.
so rewarding.
And you anticipated my next question, because I know I do follow you on LinkedIn, and that's some of the videos and interviews that I've heard you, not interviews, but videos I've heard, and you do talk about journaling. I heard that recently, and so it's interesting that you said it could be a good technique, but it's not good for everybody.
Right.
Right? You find the person who that resonates with. So you said journaling was one, and you mentioned a few others that I just wanted to recap. What was another way that this person, and relaxation? I'm sure. Do you do meditation with clients?
I don't do meditation with clients or teach meditation. I don't presume to be a meditation teacher.
Mhm.
I'm an advocate. I think it's a powerful tool. I think with this client, yeah, it wasn't. He probably wasn't. He isn't someone who came in thinking about meditation or journaling. And many times, clients are, well, that's a lot of time. I'm very busy. So I try to find ways to, as I said, meet them where they are and figure out what they can do. And I am a believer that meditation and journaling are extremely helpful. For me, they are. But really, the
Mhm.
most important thing is your ongoing practice, if you will, your ongoing ability to kind of retrain some of your inner thinking as
Mhm.
you're going into situations. And so
Mhm.
for this client, he was uh, breathing exercises worked for him, like prior to interviews or just generally box breathing or different
Mhm.
programmatic breathing, which kind of takes the attention away from the mind and just kind of, it's hard to be thinking while you're focusing on your breathing. In fact, impossible. If you're fully focused on your breathing, then you're not thinking. And that's helpful just even for a few minutes or even for a few seconds to get a glimpse of kind of a calmer state, which
Mhm.
then leads to kind of wanting more of that. And that's what I call the practice. You can do that just kind of all the time. Um,
Brian, I love that. I'm interrupting you for a second, but I love that because that's exactly what I teach my clients when they have some anxiety about public speaking, the box breathing. They're
yeah,
just taking that moment, take a breath. So
yeah,
often we forget to breathe, and it's amazing the power of the breath and the pause to help you have composure.
right.
So I
Yeah,
love that you said you really can't do both. If you're really thinking about your breathing, for that moment, you don't think as much about the anxiety because you're
right,
focused on something. I
right.
love that.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's where the anxiety comes from is some mental thoughts that's triggering emotion or
Mhm,
emotion triggering thoughts. And you can kind of step away from that a little bit, or at least cool that off a bit. The other thing, my this particular client just happened to really resonate with a small mental model. Meaning, I heard a musician, I forget who said it, but he said he would have a lot of anxiety before shows, getting on stage, and I think a lot of people do. I
mhm,
certainly do and would. And he kind of reframed that to thinking, okay, anxiety is really my body's way of getting ready to do something great. Like he thought of it like, okay, this is good because I'm getting ready to do something amazing. And that's what my client started to resonate with. That just clicked with him. He liked
mhm,
that. So then he carries that in. He's okay, this is cool because I'm getting nervous. So that means I'm coming into some great things. I must be beyond my comfort zone. I must be, heading up to and probably doing things I always wanted to do or getting into
mhm.
positions that I was hoping for. So that's a good way to do
And
that.
Brian, have you attended some of my classes in public speaking? That's because I do talk about that, and I talk about athletes who have before a game, they're feeling that same adrenaline rush, but they're not saying, "I'm nervous." They're saying, "I'm ready to perform." So
Yeah,
that adrenaline rush, if we embrace it and know that it does help us perform, and
that's
it's
right.
because we care enough to perform, that you take away that whole inner narrative about, "I'm so nervous,"
That's
because
right.
that doesn't help us. So that I love that you said that. So, these are so many and I don't think that I teach as much the mindfulness and emotional IQ, but I teach the strategies to help people harness anxiety, and so it does fall under that
Yeah.
same umbrella.
Yeah, and
But
that's great, and I'm so happy that that sort of dovetails because I think it works, and you're seeing it work too. When you go a little bit, so these are sort of what I would call, accessible tools that almost anybody can kind of get into. And
mhm,
when I go to the next level, one of the things I think is most important is just noticing. So if you're meditating and journaling, that's fine because you're really spending time noticing. But in your daily practice, you could notice what's happening in your mind, and by noticing you're almost separating yourself a little bit. You're saying, I see what my mind is doing and I see what my emotions are doing. Not necessarily correct, it's just it's happening just the way my
mhm,
heart is beating, just the way I'm
mhm,
breathing. It's not always what I need. So that gets into a little deeper mindfulness kind of tactics. But that's what I would add to what we said there is also, can you just notice what's happening? And you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to, get angry about it or stop it or try to write it down or just noticing. And that's what this other client, this client I was talking about, was also kind of starting to help him open up that sort of deeper mindfulness, is starting to
mhm,
realize that he can notice his mind and emotions and not necessarily just be wrapped up completely in them.
mhm. And so sometimes even just feeling your hands a little jittery instead of then leading down down the negative path, it could be, well, that I have a lot of adrenaline rushing.
Yeah.
Let's get started.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
it's how you frame it too. So I know you said you don't always have to just flip the frame, but observe it and know that it's telling you something,
Right.
and then you can move beyond it.
Right.
Let me ask you this question that I like to ask all of my guests, and, because again, I talk about speaking, sounding, and looking like leaders. What do you think is one essential skill that you need to speak, sound, and look like a leader?
Yeah, the one skill, that's a good one. That really boils it down. And I think if I have to pick one, I'm gonna. go with self-awareness.
Mm,
And I mean that in the broader sense, and also in the sort of emotional intelligence sense. Understanding what's going on inside. I define self-awareness similar to EQ, which is basically understanding what's going on inside you and knowing how to deal with it productively,
mm,
so that it's not throwing you off your game. So it's kind of that inner game. And so
yes.
I would say that's the start. That's probably the most important. Of course, from then you can get into communication and relationships and
Mm,
listening, which is probably the next derivation of self-awareness and EQ, is that good listening. But I think that stuff comes from almost naturally, or is opened up by an ever deepening self-awareness. I think you can go as deep the journey through self-awareness can go for your entire lifetime, and the further you go, the more you're going to be able to um, handle what's happening inside you, but also what's happening inside someone else. And maybe they're not as self-aware. Maybe they are
mm,
been taken over by uh, mental thinking, or negative thinking. Now your self-awareness is even more important, because you've got to be able to prevent yourself from being caught into that,
mm,
especially as a leader, because a lot of times the people around you, you're leading, and they're looking for you to have you need to have a sort of a higher level of presence and awareness than even in times of stress, when other people are maybe not,
mm.
in that place. So I would say that self-awareness at a deepening level will then lead the way to all these other skills.
That's terrific because it could be the self-awareness that I'm not reacting well to the situation, but I become aware of it instead of just then react, and
Right.
then it spirals downward. So I love that answer. Brian, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. My business is called Stoic Executive. So stoicexecutive.com is my website, which certainly is a place there. There's buttons to book a call, a free consultation. I'm on LinkedIn, Brian Frohn. I've
Mhm.
got a bunch of stuff on LinkedIn in terms of posts, as you mentioned, and
Yes.
references. And there's a book a meeting call on LinkedIn as well. Or you can email me at brian.frohn@stoicexecutive.com.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for sharing this information. And I didn't realize how much we are in alignment with a lot of the things we talked about, be it the mindfulness, the breathing, the helping people learn to breathe better, and changing your thoughts about some anxiety or concerns that you might have. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. And I know this is just the beginning of many conversations that we'll have.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it.
Sure.